So, how does one single ancient text, the written Torah, end up as the foundation for three totally different world religions? It's a huge question. And in this explainer, we're going to dive into a really fascinating and honestly pretty provocative argument from our sources. The claim is that it wasn't just a matter of simple interpretation, but something much deeper, a fundamental transformation.
Everyone took the written Torah like a lump of dough and made changes to make it their own. I mean, what a metaphor, right? It really gets to the heart of the argument we're looking at. The idea is that this wasn't some passive reading exercise. Oh no, it was all about active reshaping. The thinking is that Rabbinic Judaism, Christianity, and Islam didn't just read the Torah, they kneaded it, molded it, almost like a baker to fit their own unique worldviews. So the big question is, how did they do it? Well, according to the perspective we're examining, this whole transformation happened in three main ways. First, by adding new rules. Second, by removing old laws. And third, by changing the core stories themselves. Let's start with that first one, adding new layers of meaning and law. So our first case study is Rabbinic Judaism. The argument here centers on the oral Torah. That huge body of rabbinic interpretation and tradition. The claim is that the oral Torah didn't just explain the original written text. Instead, it actively expanded it, creating a whole bunch of new obligations that you just won't find in the original written word. Okay, this is a fantastic example. In the written Torah, you have a really specific command. Do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Simple enough. But then look what happens in the oral Torah. That one very specific rule, it expands into a total ban on mixing any kind of meat and dairy. That's where you get the rules for separate dishes, waiting for hours between meals, the whole shebang. So you see how a single line evolves into this complex system for everyday life. That's a textbook case of adding, according to this view. And look, this wasn't just a one-time thing. The sources point to the same pattern happening over and over. Take Shabbat, for instance. The written Torah says, do not work. But the oral Torah? It defines 39 very specific categories of what work actually is. Or what about tefillin? The Torah says to bind them as a sign, which is pretty symbolic. The oral Torah turns that into a super detailed set of laws about how to build the boxes and write the scrolls. So the argument is clear. New layers of law were just systematically built right on top of the original text. Okay, so that was adding. Now let's look at the second transformation, which is basically the polar opposite. The argument here is that Christianity didn't add laws, it removed them. The claim is that the New Testament essentially just canceled or nullified many of the Torah's most basic commands. For example, think about the kosher dietary laws. In the New Testament, they're basically declared clean, gone. Or what about the famous principle of an eye for an eye? That gets directly replaced by Jesus' teaching to turn the other cheek. According to this source material, these aren't just minor reinterpretations. Nope, these are seen as direct cancellations of the old law, making way for something completely new. And that brings us to our third and final transformation. And this one might be the most fundamental of all, changing the core narratives themselves. The argument from our sources is that Islam didn't just add or remove laws. It went deeper. It actually altered the very fabric of the Torah's biggest stories, recasting key characters and, in some cases, changing the entire plot. A perfect example of this is the story of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son. It's a pivotal moment. In the Torah, the son is clearly identified as Isaac, who is the ancestor of the Israelites. But in the Quran, while the son isn't named in the text itself, Islamic tradition overwhelmingly identifies him as Ishmael, the ancestor of the Arabs. Just that one change, switching the son, completely reorients the story's meaning, its legacy, and the entire lineage of the covenant. It's a huge shift. And here's another really dramatic shift, the incident with the golden calf. Now, in the Torah's version, Aaron, Moses' own brother, is involved. He's complicit. But in the Quran's account, a new character is introduced, a man named Al-Samari, and he's the one who gets the blame. This one change completely exonerates Aaron, preserving his status as a prophet. It's a fundamental rewrite of who's responsible for what. So let's just pull this all together. We've got adding, removing, and changing. According to the source material we're looking at, these aren't just random edits. They're seen as three very distinct strategies, and each one served a specific agenda, to tailor that original text to fit a new and totally different religious framework. And the source material we're pulling from is, well, it's incredibly direct about this. It doesn't pull any punches. It uses all this evidence to draw a very, very sharp conclusion that the only genuine book is the Old Testament. all of these new religions are designed to change it. Now, that is a provocative thesis for sure, and it's the core argument we've been unpacking here today.
So, all of this leaves us with a really crucial question, one to think about. I mean, all religions interpret their foundational texts, right? That's what they do. But when does that interpretation cross a line and become an actual alteration? Where do you draw that line between simply evolving a tradition and creating something entirely new? That's really the central challenge that this whole perspective forces us to think about.